Hello, Running Out the Clock fans. This is Chandler. I'm recording one of our overtime podcasts for one of those moments when we run out of time on the show and we want to take a little bit deeper of a dive. And I'm going to do that first with Ole Miss. And I'm looking at the question of how do you define success in the Matt Luke era? And as we head into the 2018 football season, this is year one of the Matt Luke era. And I'm fully aware that he was the coach last year, but last year doesn't count. Because last year he was an interim coach. He found out he was the coach just a few weeks before fall camp, much less the season itself started. He was handed a staff that he didn't hire, an offense that he didn't choose to run, and a team that he was not in control of recruiting. And so last year, the goal for Matt Luke was not to build a program. The goal was just to kind of hold it together until Ole Miss could see what the fallout from the Hugh Freeze situation was going to be, the ultimate NCAA punishment, and just a whole bunch of other things that didn't necessarily have to do with wins and losses. And as I get into this, I'm a fan. I'm an Ole Miss fan. I graduated from Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss. We try to go to as many games as we can. I would spend every weekend in Oxford, whether the team was 2-10 or 10-2. It doesn't matter. I'm going to be there. So I am a fan, but I will say this, that as a fan, I was not for hiring Matt Luke. And that doesn't really have anything to do with Matt Luke. It has everything to do with my opinion that Ole Miss needed to and still needs to have a complete and total clean break from the Hugh Freeze era. Now, this isn't fair to Matt, but Matt Luke is always going to be associated with Freeze. Even though he's listed several other coaches, notably David Cutcliffe and Phil Fulmer, as his top influences, he was on Freeze's staff, and he was one of the higher-ranking, guys in the inner circle with Hugh Freeze. So that said, like I said, I was not just overwhelmed with the hire. I don't know what better options were out there. So, that's just kind of how it works. But none of that matters because he's the coach. And as a fan, I'm going to support the program and I'm going to support him. I hope he does well. He seems like a good guy. He loves Ole Miss. His family is Ole Miss. They just seem like they are Ole Miss people through and through. They love the school. I don't think that really should necessarily play into a decision to hire somebody as a coach. But if it happens that he is the coach and that's the situation, then you've got to be happy. You've got maybe not necessarily happy about it, but you got to be happy for the guy, put it that way. But I do think that there's a very clear path to success for Matt Luke. It's going to take a little while. Now, I'm not saying that he gets just 5 years no matter what. There are obviously going to be things along the way that might show you that the program is not headed in the right direction. If you're in year 2 or 3 and you're having major discipline problems, you're still having major clock management issues, you are still having some of the issues that just look like an unfocused and unprepared football team, well, then I think that you don't need to wait 5 years. You don't need to wait till the end of a contract even to say, hey, this guy's not getting it done, we need to move on. But I do think that even if the wins don't necessarily immediately follow, I do think that the path to success for Matt Luke is defined by consistency. It might take a little time, but I think success for Matt Luke will be defined as consistency. Now, obviously, when you talk about success, we live in an era where the ultimate argument winner for greatness or for anything else like that is rings, right? The obvious answer for every Power 5 program, and especially program in the SEC, the obvious answer for what is success is championships. And by that definition, no Ole Miss coach in the modern era has been successful. But then again, very few active coaches have done that. There are only, as of right now, there are only 3 active college football coaches who have won national championships. I do expect Ohio State will do the wrong thing and put Urban Meyer back on the sideline, even though he should never set foot in college football ever again. But by the start of the season, there will be 4 coaches on the sideline out of, I don't know how many Power 5 teams there are, but there are a lot. There will be 4 coaches that have won championships. So championship or bust can't be the definition for success. And I would even argue that the current environment of college sports, especially college football, is set up so that only a few programs can really compete. And Ole Miss is not one of those programs. But again, like I said, winning championships cannot be the only gauge or even a necessarily good gauge for actual success. I mean, Gene Chizik did win a national championship. So like I said, success for Matt Luke and for Ole Miss is consistency. And consistency is something that Hugh Freeze could never, ever seem to achieve. I mean, for every win over Alabama or LSU that you had, there was an embarrassing loss to Florida, or there was losing to Memphis. The Sugar Bowl was a ton of fun. I mean, I was there. It was a great night. We were in the Superdome, and it was electric. And Laramie Tunsil's out there catching touchdown passes, and you've got the Ole Miss winning the Sugar Bowl and confetti falling from the ceiling. It was an incredible day. But the year before, you had the Fiesta Bowl, where the team wasn't focused, they weren't prepared, and I think if you were like me, most Ole Miss fans turned the game off halfway through the second quarter. And my favorite story to come out of that game is the kid who in Atlanta, after the game, got so drunk that he got in an Uber that drove him all the way back to Oxford. You had the tip six in Tuscaloosa with that crazy catch where Kelly throws the ball up and it flies up in the air, and Adeboyejo grabs it and runs in for a touchdown. But you also had the hog and lateral, which probably lost you the SEC West. So consistency was never a thing for Hugh Freeze. He always struggled with it. Matt Luke needs to build a consistent program. Ole Miss needs to be a program that looks at its schedule each year and feels pretty good about 7 or 8 wins. Now, that's obviously not the high water mark that you need to get to, but that should be the base expectation every year. If Matt Luke can get to winning 7 or 8 games, he'll be in pretty good shape, I think, to take the next step. But you play 4 non-conference teams. You play Vanderbilt every year. You play Arkansas every year. You play Mississippi State every year. And then most years you don't play Georgia. So you can find 7 or 8 wins out of those teams. Now, that's not to say that Ole Miss should go on a 100-year winning streak or even a 5-year winning streak against Arkansas or Mississippi State, especially as Mississippi State is in better shape right now as a program. But I think that if an Ole Miss coach is going to be successful, if he's going to be consistent, he needs to reasonably expect to beat those teams. Now, Freeze was 17-3 in the non-conference. He was 3-2 against both Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. He was 2-3 against Arkansas. And staying right at 500 against those teams is not really a recipe for success for Ole Miss. I would say that you would need to probably go over a 5-year stretch, go 4-1 against Vanderbilt, against Arkansas, and stay around 500 with Mississippi State. But more than just consistently beating teams that they should, Matt Luke needs to find a way to make Ole Miss consistent on the field. Freeze's offense, in many ways, was exciting and fun and unpredictable, but it was also infuriating and stupid. For as exciting as quarterback play was under Freeze, Ole Miss could not ever seem to line up on 3rd and short or whatever in goal and get the yards that they needed either to extend or close out a drive. As much fun as it was, I'm sure for some people, not ever for me, but as much fun as it was to see a 300-pound backup left tackle trot out there in goal line packages to run into the right guard's butt and fall down. As much fun as that was for a lot of people to watch, it was infuriating. And the reason that happened was because you never had an offensive line or really a running back that could go and get you those few yards. And I don't think, if you look at last year, if you look at 2017, I don't think that was because of the talent. I think the talent was there. I think the talent was there to be able to line up, blow guys off the line, and get those few tough yards. Because if you look at 2017, Jordan Wilkins was a 1,000-yard rusher. He finished the year with 1,011 yards. And before that, I don't think Hugh Freeze had ever had a running back eclipse 900 yards. So Matt Luke needs to be able to build a team that can go out and consistently get you rushing yards where you need them. And I'm a firm believer. I'm not a believer, but I'm a huge fan of watching teams go throw the ball 60 times a game. It's so much fun. And whenever I play, in fact, I don't play Madden anymore because you can't throw the ball 60 times a game in Madden, and that's dumb. But in real life, it's not video game football. You've got to be able to run the ball. So Ole Miss needs to find a way to be consistent on the field. The next thing that Ole Miss has got to figure out how to do is they've got to figure out how to be consistent in recruiting. And in my opinion, the Hugh Freeze recruiting method is not sustainable. The teams on the field in 2017, 2018, and 2019 are still going to largely be Hugh Freeze teams. And that's why I think that Matt deserves, if he can show steps in the right direction, that's why I think Matt deserves patience. More specifically, the defenses on the field will be Hugh Freeze defenses. And if you want to blame the NCAA for Freeze's recruiting difficulties, that's fine. I mean, they certainly didn't help. And, like most Ole Miss fans, I have my thoughts for kind of how that NCAA investigation played out. And, yeah, just a lot of thoughts there. But take that out of the equation. There have been plenty of solid Mississippi players who would have jumped at the chance to be SEC players, especially linebackers. See, Freeze was obsessed with chasing stars. If given the choice between finding a mid to high 4-star wide receiver or a solid, maybe 3-star linebacker who might not contribute immediately but would grow into a role, he would always go with the receiver. And then I think, too, to add on to that, he would be all in on guys like Leo Lewis and Mike Juarez, even long after it became clear that those players were not signing with Ole Miss. And in the same year that Ole Miss was hard after Mike Juarez, they had a commitment from a player named David Luafatasaga, who ended up on signing day flipping to Utah. And Luafatasaga has not had a great career, but a guy who's got double-digit tackles and a few sacks, I mean, that would help the Ole Miss defense. And so he chased stars. He went after the highest names in recruiting, and when he missed out on them, which he often did, he never really had a backup plan. And so you go and you sign, like I said, the rangy wide receivers, which, hey, that's turned out pretty well on offense. So, I mean, I guess that's one thing. Or tweener athletes that never really quite seem to pan out. And so Matt Luke has got to be able to identify talent outside of elite recruits. To be sure, any program that wants to compete nationally is going to have to sign elite recruits. But Freeze never seemed to have a strategy for what to do when missing out on those prospects, and he often struck out on signing day. I mean, for all the allegations, and none of the NCAA documents allege this, but for all the allegations that Ole Miss was just throwing just tons and tons and tons of cash at players, there were a whole bunch of guys that went to other schools and were signing day decisions that you would think that maybe that wouldn't happen if they were throwing that much money at players. But that's besides the point. There are a lot of good players out there that you need to get in your program and develop. And to be sure, Ole Miss is always going to have chances with elite players. Every SEC school will. And Ole Miss will get their share. I mean, they've developed a solid reputation with quarterbacks, linemen, particularly left tackles, and wide receivers. But you've got to recruit to your needs, not to rankings. You can't tell me that a player like Jannard Avery, who's from, I believe, Grenada, Mississippi, he was a multi-year starter in Memphis, and he's now on an NFL roster. You can't tell me that he would not have significantly bolstered a very weak linebacker core over the last 4 years. The same goes with Avery Genesee, who played offensive line at Texas A&M. So Ole Miss has got to be consistent in recruiting. Now, the last thing I think that Ole Miss needs is Ole Miss needs to be consistent in its identity. The question of who are you as a program, I don't think Hugh Freeze ever really could answer that. And as the years went on, he seemed like he fell more in love with Hugh Freeze and the Hugh Freeze brand and his star power than with coaching football. Now, I don't think that's going to be Matt Luke's problem. Matt Luke does not strike me as the kind of guy who's going to want to be hanging out with Danica Patrick at Rebel Rags or, getting on stage with these terrible bro country Nashville acts or, going on tour with Mercy Me or whatever it is that he was doing at the time. I don't think that's going to be Matt's problem because that doesn't seem like the kind of guy Matt is. But more than that, Ole Miss never seemed to have an identity on the field either. I mean, when you looked at them, it was like, okay, are they an air raid team? Are they a spread option team? Are they a power run team? And the answer was at least an attempted yes at all those questions, which really led to solid no's to all three. I mean, you couldn't really do any one of those super well. And I know this feels nitpicky because, hey, you did. You beat Alabama. You beat LSU. You beat Texas A&M. You had a winning record against your in-state rival. I mean, those things were all great, but it would always be the complete lack of consistency and the complete lack of identity when you would go into a game against a team that you really should have beaten and you'd really struggle. And so at no point in Hugh Freeze's era could you really look at them and feel like you knew exactly who they were. And outside of 2014 and 15, with the rebirth of the true Landshark defense, the defensive side of the ball never really had an identity. So the Rebels need to figure out who they are, and they need to build towards that. But here's the thing about all this. It's going to take a little while to get out of the mess that Hugh Freeze left behind, but I don't think it's going to be that hard. I mean, obviously, you're in the SEC, you're in the SEC West, you are routinely coaching against you're now routinely coaching against Gus Malzahn, Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher. Maybe if LSU decides to not hire a walking dumpster fire, you're competing against big name programs. You're competing against big name coaches. But I don't think it's going to be that hard. I still really don't. Because for Freeze's reputation as an offensive genius and great recruiter, like I said, they could never run the ball and they couldn't close on signing day. Hugh Freeze never had a particularly impressive coaching and recruiting staff. And so if Matt Luke can build a staff that can identify talent and recruit well, and if he can build a staff that can come up with a consistent identity on and off the field, I think Ole Miss, sooner rather than later, can return to that level of consistency that they need, and then to go from that level to the next level. See, I may be way off here, but I think if Luke can lead the Rebels to a very lean year in 2019 and start to show signs of being not just a consistent team, but a consistent program, his era will be considered a success. And hopefully it'll be one that lasts longer than 5 years, because sadly enough, Matt Luke is the longest tenured coach. The longest tenured coach that Ole Miss has had since I think like 2000 has been David Cutcliffe, and he left in 2005. I mean, Ed Ogeron had 3 years, Houston Nutt had 4, Hugh Freeze got 5. So I think Matt Luke can build a consistent program, and then I think as that consistency starts to develop, you'll see the recruiting pick up, and you'll see hopefully Ole Miss return to a level of prominence and fun football that we saw without some of the infuriatingly maddening lows that we experienced under the Hugh Freeze era. So thanks for listening. This has been an Overtime podcast. Stay tuned for more running out the clock content. Thank you so much for listening.